Describe an experience when you got bored when you were with other people. Thinking about this topic, what comes to my mind first was the time when I travelled with my friend to an underdeveloped community. As far as I can remember, it happened last April when me and my friend got the chance to hang out with each other. Actually, we didn't have exact plans that day, so we just spontaneously went on a trip somewhere. So we ended up in an outdated community. In this community, they have an unpopular museum that, according to one of the local people we met along our way, contains a lot of historical relics and masterpieces. So we decided to explore the place. When we entered this museum, we were disappointed because the relics were already gone. According to the owner of it, they just moved those relics into another museum. My friend and I were even pretty excited, but everything just turned into dismay. Then we realized the reason why we didn't pay for any tickets for this museum, since in the end we would just see nothing. If only we knew beforehand that the outcome would be so disappointing, then we would have chosen another place. Basically, it was extremely tedious because we didn't see anything in the museum. We had many expectations about this place, so we were really frustrated. Anyway, I learned from this experience that we should always do critical research first before going to an unknown place. Before going on a trip, we should first plan carefully so we won't waste our time, our money, and our energy.
Wow, there are quite a few experiences where I have felt really bored when with others. But the one that really stands out in my mind is a really boring event arranged by my company that took place a few years ago. At the time, I was working for a PR company, a public relations company in the CBD in Beijing. The job was quite interesting in some ways, but pretty challenging. The company mainly focused on organising events for big companies and global brands. Many people think this sounds really exciting, but really, I can tell you it's not. There are a lot of public events like press conferences and media events like promotions for big companies. These sound exciting on the surface, but in reality, unless you are one of the stars or speakers on the stage, then these events are really boring. They mean you have to hang around behind the scenes for hours and hours and hours. The one that sticks in my mind the most is an event for a car company that was held in Shanghai. I had to go help set up the stage, the lighting, and all sorts of other practical details at around 5 a.m. Then I had to stop there the whole day helping with seating, welcoming the guests, and lots of other things. Standing on my feet the whole time and making sure everything went smoothly. Then I had to stay after the event until everything was packed up. Basically, I spent the whole day helping people out doing menial, boring tasks, and then listening to endless, boring speeches and presentations, then helping the team to pack everything away at the end. It was one of the most boring and tiring experiences that I can remember. And worse, because people who do not know about this kind of thing think the whole thing sounds cool and glamorous. I can assure you, it was far from it for me.
Well, actually, mentioned about like the topic, a time when I was rather bored has got to do something with a lecture. To be precise, in the first year of my college life, I was chosen to sit in a lecture. By the way, I was the only one of my class who had to participate in this activity. The subject was about how to be a good member of university. I remember that it was like a Sunday afternoon when I had the opportunity to take part in such a great event. There were like more than 100 people at the time. When the lecture got started, I didn't realize that it was so long. 4 to 5 hours at least. That drives me crazy for sure. More importantly, I was not allowed to leave in the middle. In the middle of the lecture. Meantime, my mobile phone was not with me since I put it in the dormitory. I forgot it. Imagine that you couldn't use your mobile phone while listening to a boring lecture. I mean, the speaker was great, quite positive and energetic. I can say he might be full of something on that day. But personally, for my part, I had no interest in the subject at all. Interestingly, I didn't know anyone who was like sitting nearby me, so I felt like disastrous after attending to this lecture. So that's it.
Well, this topic is describing a time that I got bored when I was with others. Honestly, I really like this topic. It's very interesting because it happens to me a lot. There are just so many boring people out there. Last week, I think it was on Wednesday or Thursday, I had the afternoon off. Since I was going to have this IELTS test very soon, I thought I might as well just study for the test. So I went to a cafe not very far from my apartment, and I sat down there, ordered a cup of coffee, and began studying. I was learning English, and then there was a foreign guy sitting next to me. He saw that I was learning English, and he got really interested in me. So we just began chatting. And yeah, what we did, well, all we did was just talk. And first, he asked me why I was learning English. I told him that I was going to take the IELTS test because I wanted to go and study in the UK. My dream university is the University of Manchester. And then we began talking about my life, his life. He revealed that he had been living in China for 10 years and he had visited most of the provinces in our country, and his favorite was Yunnan because he was really fond of the food, people, and scenery there. And then our conversation took a drastic turn. He began talking about US-China relationships. He started talking about the trade war. So it was at that point that I got really bored because I just had no clue what he was talking about. He talked about Trump and his administration, and he said the trade war would lead to an economic downturn in the world. Well, I couldn't understand anything, so I just said that I had to be somewhere else, and I just left.
Okay, here is a part 2 topic. The topic is describe an experience when you got bored when you were with other people. Let's have a listen to sample 1.
Thinking about this topic, what comes to my mind first was the time when I travelled with my friend to an underdeveloped community.
Nope. There's a problem here. Remember, in part 2, you have 1 minute to prepare and think about what you're going to say. So you can't say what comes to my mind first because you already thought about this. So what he should have said is, when I thought about this topic, what came to my mind first was the time when. This should be in the past tense because you had already thought of this. You're not thinking of it right now.
A developed community. As far as I can remember, it happened last...
As far as I can remember, let's throw in a comma there. As far as I can remember, that's a good marker.
Community. As far as I can remember, it happened last April when me and my friend...
If you're a stickler for grammar, you'd probably want to say when my friend and I, not me and my friend.
...the chance to hang out with each other. Actually, we didn't have exact plans that day, so we just spontaneously...
That's a good adverb. We just spontaneously went. These two words go together very well.
...on a trip somewhere. So we ended up in an outdated community.
I don't really know what he's talking about. What is this community? Because here in Taiwan, where I live, when people talk about a community, usually they mean like an apartment complex. Now, is he talking about a town? Is he talking about some community in the mountains? What is this community?
In this community, they have an unpopular museum that, according to one of the local people we met along our way, contains a lot of historical relics and masterpieces.
I'm still a little bit confused. But this community does have some residents. He says local people here. He could have said resident. He didn't. He went with people. It's a bit unfortunate. If you use the word resident, that's more of a less commonly used word. But here we have historical relic. Relic, something old that remains from the past. That's a good word to use. And we have the word masterpieces. That's also not a bad word. I'm guessing here masterpieces refer to artwork.
Masterpieces. So we decided to explore the place. When we entered this museum,
Notice here past tense. Decided, entered, were disappointed.
we were disappointed because the relics were already gone. According to the owner of it, they just moved those relics into another museum.
Now there are some problems here with the grammar because the moving happened before their disappointment, right? Before they were disappointed. So that means for this here, he should use the past perfect tense. So according to the owner, I'll come back to of it in just a second, but according to the owner, they had just moved those relics into another museum. Had, because this happened before they went to the museum. Now, according to the owner of it, well, two things. Number one, relics is plural, so it should be them. And second of all, we don't say according to the owner of it. You can just say according to the owner. For some reason, I don't know why, but if we use this phrase, the owner of, it sounds strange if we use a pronoun. Now, if you said according to the owner of the relics, that would be okay. But if you say according to the owner of them, it just sounds weird. I don't know why, but in English, it's just the way it is. So, don't use a pronoun after the phrase the owner of.
Already gone. According to the owner of it, they just moved those relics into
According to the owner, they had already moved the relics into another museum.
another museum. My friend and I were even pretty excited.
Now this is a bit confusing because the owner tells them, hey, the relics are gone, and then he and his friends are excited. So again here, we had been pretty excited.
Were even pretty excited, but everything just turned into dismay. Then
Everything turned into dismay. Alright, so here he's using dismay as a noun. You don't see that a lot. That's kind of less commonly used.
we realized the reason why we didn't pay for any tickets for this museum, since in the end we would just see nothing.
I don't quite understand this. Then we realized the reason why we didn't pay for any tickets. So I think what he's trying to say is, then we realized why we didn't need to buy a ticket. We didn't pay for any tickets. Since in the end we just see nothing. Okay, so maybe then we realized why no tickets were needed to enter the museum. Or that's the reason why, we realized why the entry to the museum is free, I guess. Okay. So then we realized why entry to the museum was free, since in the end, we ended up seeing nothing.
In the end, we would just see nothing. If only we knew beforehand that the outcome would be so disappointing, then we would have chosen another place.
Okay.
Basically, it was extremely tedious
Alright, tedious, a great word to use instead of boring.
because we didn't see anything in the museum. We had many expectations about this place, so we were really frustrated.
Okay, I feel like he's going on too much about how he and his friend felt. We were frustrated. We were disappointed. We were dismayed. Okay, we get it. We were frustrated. Okay.
Anyway, I learned from this experience that we should always do critical research first before going to an unknown place.
Do critical research. Okay, yeah, do your research before you travel somewhere. Okay.
Before going on a trip, we should first plan carefully so we won't waste our time, our money, and our energy.
I just want to say something about the pronunciation here at the end where he lists those three things. Just listen to that again.
Plan carefully so we won't waste our time.
Our time up, our money up.
Our money and our energy.
And then, oh, come on now. So, I don't know if you noticed, but when he said energy, his voice fell because that was the last in the list of three nouns that can be wasted. Our time, our money, and our energy. Down. Okay, so let's see what is good and what is not so good about this. Okay, let's have a look at this in written form. As far as coherence goes, the guy did speak pretty fluently, but as always, it's difficult to judge fluency when looking at something that's written down. Let's look at how he starts many of his sentences. These are the ones that I have underlined. These phrases that start sentences. For example, here, thinking about this topic. Here, as far as I can remember, we have actually, we have so. These are the words that the examiners are going to be listening out for in your test. And he has other phrases here. What comes to my mind first? As always, I suggest you change the tense though. I do suggest you change this to what came to my mind first, because you already had 1 minute to think about this. So what came to your mind before you started speaking. And then here we have another so. That's not that important. And then moving on, here we have some referencing. He's referring back to the community using the word this. We have so, we have when, according to the owner. We have then, phrases like this. We have determiners. We have pronouns in the middle of sentences as adding cohesion. We have words like basically, so, anyway. And look at this if structure here. If, then, because. If we knew, then we would have done this. It was basically extremely tedious because, see, simple words, and they're sprinkled all throughout the response. Okay, moving on to the lexical resource used in this response. Here we have the phrase underdeveloped, describing the community. I thought that was pretty good. Here we have the adjective exact, describing plans. That was pretty good. Here we have the adverb spontaneously, describing the verb went. Ended up is a pretty good phrase. Outdated community, I don't know what that is. I mean, here he describes it as an underdeveloped community. I understand that, meaning pretty poor. Outdated, what is that? There is no word like that. Does he mean underprivileged community? Maybe. But then he should have said underprivileged, not outdated. There's no such thing such as outdated community. Here we have historical relics. Great. Adjective with noun. Very good. These two words go together very well. We have the word masterpieces. That's pretty good. We have the word dismay. That's also good. Unfortunately, this is the wrong preposition. Things don't turn into dismay. Things turn to dismay. Things turn to dismay. Here, my friend and I were even pretty excited. Why use the word even? The preceding sentence shows nothing about anybody feeling anything. So why even? There's no connection between these two sentences. And here, according to the owner of it, drop this. We don't put the pronoun it after the owner. Just say, according to the owner, they just moved those relics. Moving on to the grammar. I mentioned this already, but this should be came because you spent 1 minute thinking about this before you started talking. Here we have some change in tenses, like for example, the time when I traveled, using the past tense, and then switching to the present tense because right now you can remember this. So it's good that he switches tenses when needed to. And actually, as far as the grammar goes, there isn't really all that much that is really good. Maybe I could add this, because here we have a relative clause. They have an unpopular museum that, according to one of the local people met along our way, contains. So adding this phrase here we go. This is the relative clause. This is good. But other than that, look at this. All the sentences are pretty short. So we decided to explore the place. When we entered the museum, we were disappointed because the relics were already gone. Simple sentence. Well, they were joined by pretty simple conjunctions like but here, because here. So grammar is kind of simple except for this sentence here. Here you should have used the past perfect tense. According to the owner, they had just moved those relics into another museum. Here, wrong tense. Here we have some noun phrases. Then we realize the reason why we didn't pay for any tickets for this museum. I think the sentence is very awkward. This is not something I would say, but it is good that he uses this noun phrase here. Here again, he's using the wrong tense. This should have been if only we had known beforehand. Past perfect tense, when one thing happened before the other. Here he uses the past perfect tense. We would have chosen. Here he's using a modal with the past participle, would and chosen. Then we would have chosen another place, showing things they would have done in the past but didn't actually do. This is good grammar. And here we have again noun phrases. But the grammar here, although fairly accurate, is not that outstanding. It's good as far as the error count goes, not that great in terms of the range though. Alright, let's go on and have a listen to sample 2.
Wow, there are quite a few experiences where I have felt really bored when with others. But the one that really stands out in my...
Actually, now that I think about it, let's make this a new sentence. Start this here. That makes more sense. Alright, let's do this again.
But the one that really stands out in my mind is a really boring event arranged by my company that took place a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
At the time I was working for a PR company, a public relations company.
It's not wrong that he said PR and then public relations again, but I'm 99.9999% sure the examiner is going to know what a PR company is, and you don't need to do this. It's not wrong, it's unnecessary. And when people talk, they don't say both. They either say public relations or they say PR.
In the CBD in Beijing. The job was quite interesting in some ways, but pretty challenging.
Now he's a native speaker. Even though he's reading, he's putting some intonation and stress into his answers. Like here, pretty challenging.
The company mainly focused on organizing events for big companies and global brands.
Look at this adjective going with the verb. We're going with the noun, global brands. That's pretty good. We have this adverb also going with the verb.
Many people think this sounds really exciting, but really, I can tell you
But really, it's stress on really.
It's not. There are a lot of public events like press conferences and media events like promotions for big companies. These sound exciting on the surface, but in reality, unless you are one of the stars or
Stars. Okay. Yeah, he does this well. And this phrase, look at the contrast here. That sounds exciting on the surface, but in reality, He didn't put much stress on that. But I would have put some stress on that just to show the contrast between what appears to be true on the surface and what is actually true in reality.
Stage, then these events are really boring. They mean you have to hang around behind the scenes.
Okay, here's some good idiomatic language. Hang around. So you just stand there doing nothing. Behind the scenes. Also good idiomatic language. So people don't see you. You're not on the stage.
For hours and hours and hours. The one that sticks in my mind the most.
More idiomatic language. Sticks in my mind the most. The thing that stands out the most. The thing that I remember best.
An event for a car company that was held in Shanghai. I had to go help set up the stage, the lighting and all sorts of other practical details at around 5 a.m.
Also, if you're a Chinese speaker, I sometimes hear people say stuff like 5 o'clock a.m. If you say a.m. or p.m., there's no o'clock. So you can't say 5 o'clock a.m. or 5 a.m. o'clock, although I never hear people say that though.
Then I had to stop there the whole day helping with a.m. Then I had to stop there the whole day helping with seating, welcoming the guests.
Then I had to stop there. What is there? Then I had to stop there. I'm a little bit confused about this. I don't know what the there is. Nope.
Then I had to stop there the whole day helping with seating, welcoming the guests.
Look at the rising intonation here. Helping with seating. His voice rose on that. Welcoming the guests and lots of other things.
And lots of other things. Standing on my feet the whole time and making sure everything went smoothly. Then I had to stay after the event until everything was packed up. Basically, I spent the whole day helping people out doing menial, boring tasks, and then listening to endless, boring speeches and presentations.
The longer I listen to the guy, the more he just sounds like he's reading, though. Even though he is a native speaker and his pronunciation is pretty good, the fact that he's reading is really coming through here. I mean, I can hear some stress here on boring speeches, but it still sounds like someone reading.
Then helping the team to pack everything away at the end.
But he at least tries to put some stress, like on then helping the team to pack everything away.
It was one of the most boring and tiring experiences that I can remember.
This is an adjective I don't see enough people use. Everybody knows the word boring, but for some reason people don't use the word tiring. Like bored, everybody knows. Tired, everybody knows. But people don't use the word tiring. And if you're a Chinese speaker, you cannot say it was tired. You have to say it was tiring.
And worse, because people who do not know about this kind of thing think the whole thing sounds cool and glamorous, I can assure you it was far from it for me.
I don't know. Towards the end of this, I'm kind of starting to hate the way the guy sounds, even though I said his pronunciation was really good. The reading just got to me towards the end. Let's see here. Glamorous, great adjective to use. Sounds cool and glamorous. Glamorous is really good. And here at the end, far from it for me. It was far from it. The it referring to it being cool and glamorous. This phrase at the end, I really liked. That was good. This whole response is pretty much error-free, but let's look at the written form in terms of coherence. The only issue I have is with the very first word, wow. Reason is, wow is used as a response. When someone says something, you say, wow. Like, for example, in part 3, the examiner asks you, what do you think the influence of robots is going to be on the future job market? And you say, wow, that's a hard question. But in part 2, there's no question. You just have to tell your own story. When people tell their own stories, they don't say, wow. It's weird. Anyway, minor issue. But if I have to find a fault, it would be this. Alright, let's look at this opening structure. I really do like this. there are quite a few experiences where I have felt really bored when with others. Okay, so here he takes the phrase from the prompt, because the prompt says describe an occasion when you felt really bored when with others. He takes this, he puts it in his introduction. So there have been quite a few experiences where, and then you use the phrase from the prompt, and then you go on to say, but the one that really stands out, and then you explain the one that you are going to talk about. Great structure. I really like that. Now, it is a story, so look at all the phrases here that makes it easy for us to follow the story. It took place a few years ago. He was working at a PR company. It happened in Beijing, in the CBD. I mean, these phrases just make it easy to follow what he's saying. And then look at the phrases that he starts some of these sentences with that also make it easy to follow. Like at the time, so a few years ago. The job, referring to this PR job. The company, referring to the PR company. I mean, it's really structured very well. Then moving on, where he gives examples like da-da-da-da-da, like da-da-da-da-da. Don't worry about using the word like twice, that really doesn't matter. And then we have some referencing like these, referring back to the examples that he just gave. And then here, but in reality, unless, that's a great phrase. These events, these referring to the events that he just talked about. Some more referencing, they. Starting your sentence with they after just talking about the noun that you are now referencing with the pronoun. Like starting sentences with these, referring back to the noun you just described, and here they, referring back to the noun you just described. It really ties your answer together very well, and you should think about doing that in writing also. Here he does the same thing, the one, so like the one event, starting the sentence with this. And here, where he is describing all the stuff that happens, he starts some sentences with then. Then I did this, then I did that. The phrases that are not in the beginning of the sentence, like for example, that sticks out in my mind the most, that's a great phrase. He tells us the time here, until, the whole day, at the end. Because the examiner is listening to you, they are trying to follow the story. So if you give us these time references like 5 a.m., until everything was packed up, the whole day, at the end, these little phrases just make it easier to follow what it is that you're saying. And then of course here we have the discourse marker, basically. Alright, it, again, starting a sentence with a pronoun referring to the noun you just mentioned. This kind of thing referring to that event. The whole thing again referring to the event. Some pronouns here, the it referring to the event, and the it referring to it sounding cool and glamorous. Great use of pronouns. Great use of the word thing. Okay, and then the Lexus. I did really like public relations company. Good phrase. You don't hear that a lot. This adjective, so not adjective, this adverb going with the adjective challenging, pretty. Not enough people use words like pretty or quite. Pretty. Use that. It's a simple word, but it's going to make you sound so much more fluent. Here we have the adverb, mainly, with the adjective focused. Good phrase. Global brands. Global brands. Great phrase. These two words go together so well. We got press conferences. That's good. Media events. That's also good. On the surface. That's a great phrase that you can use in so many cases. Things seem a certain way, but that's only on the surface. In reality, it's quite different. The reason why the reason why I'm highlighting in reality is because I think a lot of people would just say really. in reality, it's just a less common way of saying the same thing. I did talk about hang around before, an idiomatic phrase. Behind the scenes, also an idiomatic phrase, although in this case maybe it's more literal. But yeah, behind the scenes, great phrase where people can't see you. Here we have set up. We have this great adjective going with the noun, practical details. I highlighted seating because I think most people would probably say, then I had to stop there the whole day helping people find their seat or something like that. But using seating as a noun, great idea, helping with seating. Here we have the adverb smoothly going with went, that's good. Helping people out, I'm highlighting this because he used the word out instead of just saying helping people. Menial, a great adjective to describe boring tasks, mindless tasks. These two words go together very well. Endless, a great adjective that kind of means the same as boring, but of course not quite the same. It goes together very well with speeches. Tiring, I talked about before, and far from it. Far from it is just another way of saying not at all. Great phrase, far from it. If we have a look at the grammar, there are no mistakes. There are 0 grammatical mistakes. So if you use language like this throughout your whole test, you will get a 9 for grammar, that's for sure. Let's look at some highlights. I can't highlight too many things because there really are mistakes. Let's see where I have felt using the present perfect here. Here, using the past continuous. Past continuous because this was temporary, not permanent. So not always just using the past or just the present, switching between tenses. Here, focused, I'm highlighting this because he's using the right preposition, on, focus on. Not a lot of people, well, maybe I shouldn't say not a lot of people, not everybody gets the preposition right. It should be on, like he uses here. This part here, there's nothing really to highlight. He's just using the present tense. Like for example, here there are these sounds, unless you are, they mean. Nothing special grammar-wise, but no mistakes. And in the next part here, we see a passive structure, was helped. We have the be verb plus the past participle. Now, these words sound pretty simple when we just look at them. Helping, welcoming, standing, making. The reason why I'm highlighting these is he starts with a gerund, helping, and he continues using gerunds. If you start a sentence with a gerund, keep doing that. Don't say, then I had to stop there the whole day, helping with seating, and then to welcome. Don't switch between infinitives and gerunds. He doesn't do that, and it sounds great. And then here at the end, we have this relative structure, relative clause structure. People who do not... Whoa, what is... Something's missing here. I guess it's the word no. I was saying how this is so good, but there's a mistake. I made the mistake, not him. Okay, people who do not know about this kind of thing. So this relative clause here. People who do not know about this kind of thing. Relative clauses and if structures are a pretty easy way of helping to get a higher score for grammar. Alright, let's move on to sample 3.
Well, actually, mention about the topic, a time when...
Nope. This doesn't make any sense. Grammatically, mention about that topic doesn't make sense because mention and about don't go together. You don't mention about something, you mention something. In the context of part 2 speaking, who mentioned this? Nobody mentioned this. The examiner says I'd like you to talk about this topic. I suppose that is a mention, but don't use this introduction in part 2. Look at the example that we saw in sample 2. That was a terrific example of how to start your part 2. This mention, it's a minefield. You're going to make so many errors when you try to use mention. Just don't do this. Don't follow the structure. Use the example in part 2. Use the example in sample 2, the sample we just listened to. That was a good one.
I was rather bored, had to go to do something with a lecture. To be precise, in the first year of my college life, I was chosen to sit in a lecture.
I hope he's going to explain this chosen, because if you're a student, you're not chosen to sit in the lecture. You have to go to class.
By the way, I was the only one of my class who had to participate in this activity.
Okay, so it wasn't regular class, alright?
The subject was about how to be a good member of university.
Member? You're not a member of a university, you're a student of a university.
I remember that was like a Sunday afternoon when I had the opportunity to take part in such a great event.
Great event? But the topic of this talk is a time you were bored. So why was it great? Is he going to explain that?
There were like more than 100 people at the time. When the lecture got started, I didn't realize that it was so long. 4 to 5 hours at least. That drives me crazy for sure.
Why is this in the present tense?
More importantly, I was not allowed to leave in the middle. In the middle of the lecture.
Why does he keep on saying I mean so much? And why is this phrase even necessary? Why not just say I wasn't allowed to leave in the middle of the lecture? The lecture.
Meantime, my mobile phone.
Why does he keep on doing this? The mobile phone, my mobile phone. Why does he keep on saying I mean?
Phone was not with me since I put it in the dormitory. I forgot it.
Well, there's a difference between putting it somewhere and forgetting it. So I think he was trying to say I left it in my dorm.
Imagine that you couldn't use your mobile phone while listening to a boring lecture. The speaker was great, quite positive and energetic.
Well, this boring contradicts great, positive, energetic. I don't understand. Seems to be quite a contrast between these two sentences.
I can say he might be full of something on that day.
What? He might be full of something. What does that mean?
I can say he might be full of something on that day.
Full of caffeine?
But personally, for my part, I had no interest in the subject at all.
For my path, I don't know what the path is. I had no interest in the subject at all. Remember when he said it was a great lecture?
Interestingly, I didn't know anyone who was sitting nearby me.
Interestingly, I didn't know anyone was sitting nearby me. But what? If you have eyes, you can see.
Sitting nearby me, so I felt disastrous after it.
Disastrous is an adjective, so where is the noun? I feel like a disastrous. I feel like the lecture was disastrous. Maybe lecture can be a noun for this adjective.
Ending to this lecture, so that's it.
And for attending, there's no preposition. You don't say attending to, unless you are like a doctor and you attend to a patient. Doctors attend to patients. But if we use attend as to go and be part of something, there's no preposition. And don't end your part 2 by saying so that's it. It's an odd way of ending it. Although this guy ends all his answers like this. Okay, let's have a look at the coherence and in some case the disfluency we saw here. He starts off with well actually. This is not the right case to use actually, because what he said here is not surprising. So don't use the word actually. In this case, I talked about how this is not the right way to introduce a topic. Don't use this phrase. A time when, that's pretty good, yes. Has got to do something with the lecture. Nope. You should just have said was a time when I attended a lecture, not has got to do something with the lecture. By the way, that's good. And this activity, this also good. That refers back to the lecture here. Now the idea here is good, the execution is not so good. He wants to talk about the topic of the lecture, but when we say the subject, there's no about. So the subject was how to be blah 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 blah. There's no about. I remember that was like a Sunday afternoon. Now usually that is a good referent, but what does this refer to here? That was a Sunday afternoon. The noun here is the subject, but the subject wasn't a Sunday afternoon. The lecture was on a Sunday afternoon. So here the referencing is faulty. It refers to the wrong noun. Now here event is good because the event refers to the lecture. We know that. Here, well, actually maybe I should highlight this. When the lecture got started. That is good. We see some progression time-wise now. Okay, so this gives us an idea of when we are, at what point in the story we are now. What he's talking about. When the lecture got started. Okay, that's fine. That actually maybe I should highlight that also. That is also good. The length drove him crazy. Good. More importantly, I was not allowed to leave in the middle. Importantly here, not the right adverb. Why not say annoyingly? Because you are talking about things that annoy you. So don't say more importantly, say more annoyingly. I was not allowed to leave in the middle. And here we can see some repetition. Why is it necessary to say this? Just put the two together. I was not allowed to leave in the middle of the lecture. The meantime is pretty good. It tells us something about the time when this happens. At the same time as something else. Since is pretty good. Imagine that is pretty good. Your might be the wrong word, but maybe I misheard him. That's why I don't really want to say anything about your. Now, all of this is red because they contradict each other. Boring, great. I had no interest in the subject. Boring, positive. I had no interest in the subject. Coherence also means, do you make sense? This does not make sense because it's so contradictory. Here we have interestingly. Is this interesting? I don't think so. And what is the connection between people sitting near him or not sitting near him and the lecture being disastrous? I don't understand the connection. Okay, the lexical resource. Here we have the word rather going with bored. I do like that. That's like using the word quite. Now, here he says, I was chosen to sit in a lecture. If you really want to say sit, it's got to be sit in on. I know that sounds strange, but that's really correct. You sit in on a lecture, but I mean, usually people will say attend. I was chosen to attend a lecture, not sit in a lecture. Sit in on or attend. I mentioned this before, member of university, that's weird. It's student, how to be a good university student. There were more than 100 people at a time. I don't know what this means, to be honest with you. Here we see some idiomatic language. Something drives you crazy. That's good. Even though the tense is wrong, the language is pretty good. Here he confuses put and left. It should be I left it in my dormitory. Here when he talks about the lecture, he says it was full of something. What is the something? He leaves it to the listener to guess what he's trying to say. Well, I don't know what he's trying to say. For my path makes no sense here. Don't say that. You're just listening to somebody talk. This is not a life path. I talked about disastrous before. There's no object. Disastrous what? It's confusing. Should be lecture, I guess. For the grammar, there's some good. Let's look at this passive structure here. I was chosen. Be verb plus past participle. That's pretty good. Here we have a relative clause structure. Who had to participate? That's good. This is pretty average grammar-wise. But then when we get to this part here, I didn't realize that it was so long. No, because it's not finished yet. So how can you use the past tense? At the beginning of a lecture, it's not finished. So you should use the future. I didn't realize it was going to be so long. And even though drive me crazy is good, the tense is not right. It should be drove. That drove me crazy. Here again, we see a passive structure. I was not allowed. That's good. Here he uses an article with mobile phone incorrectly. He does correct it though. He does change the to my, but he did say that. Here we have while plus VING. That's pretty good. Here he uses the modal might, but it should be he might have been, because this happened in the past. He might have been full of, well, I don't know what the something is. Here we have after VING. That's pretty good. After goes with gerunds. Alright, here's sample 4 from one of my favorite speakers. Let's have a listen.
Well, this topic is describe a time that I got bored when I was with others.
Unfortunately, even though I just said he's one of my favorite speakers, this is not a good introduction. This topic is describe. Why are you repeating what the topic is? The topic is describe a time that I got bored when I was with others. No, don't repeat the topic. Again, go back to sample 2. That's a good introduction.
Honestly, I really like this topic. It's very interesting because it happens to me a lot. There are just so many boring people out there.
All of this might be true, but saying something like, I really like this topic, it's very interesting because it happens to me a lot. All of this might be true. Is this good grammar? Is this good vocabulary? I guess it depends on what score you're aiming for. If you want a very high score, is there really any outstanding vocabulary here? If you're looking for a mid-level score, it's okay. I mean, no errors.
Last week, I think it was on Wednesday or Thursday.
Notice the rising intonation showing uncertainty. I think it was on Wednesday or Thursday.
I had the afternoon off.
Oh, did he say have?
Day or Thursday, I had the afternoon off.
Should have been had.
Since I was going to have this IELTS test very soon, I thought I might as well just study for the test.
I might as well. Good language there.
So I went to a cafe not very far from my apartment, and I sat down there, ordered a cup of coffee, and
I love the intonation. He's listing what he did, right? I sat down there, ordered a cup of coffee, rising.
studying. I was learning English, and then
Studying English.
there was a foreign guy sitting next to me. He saw that I was learning English, and he got really interested in me. So we just began chatting. And what we did, well, all we did was just talk. And first he asked me why I was learning English. I told him that I was going to take the IELTS test because I wanted to go and study in the UK.
I mean, okay, he's telling a story, so his voice kind of sounds like he's talking kind of like a sing-song way, because he's just telling us all the things that happened. Maybe this is true. I don't think it's true because he's actually a teacher. He's not a student. But anyway, he makes it sound like it's true.
Dream University is the university.
Oh, Dream University. That is a good phrase. A Dream University.
is the University of Manchester, and then we began talking about my life, his life.
My life, his life. You'll notice the "and" is omitted. It's okay, because, well, this is very conversational English. It's not written English. It's okay to drop the "and."
University of Manchester, and then we began talking about my life, his life. He revealed that he had been living in China for 10 years.
Oh, look at this. Look at this. The past perfect continuous tense. Now, how often do you see that? That is pretty rare.
And he had visited most of the
Past perfect tense.
provinces in our country, and his favorite was Yunnan because he was really fond of the food, people, and scenery there. And then our conversation took a drastic turn.
Great language here. Took a drastic turn. So the topic changed dramatically.
We began talking about US-China relationships, you know?
Unfortunately, there's only one relationship. If it's between two parties, there's one relationship. So he began talking about the US-China relationship.
China relationships, you know? He started talking about the trade war. So
Well, that's very topical.
it was at that point that I got really bored because I just had no clue what he was talking about.
Instead of saying no idea, he used the word clue. I like that.
He talked about Trump and his administration.
Administration is a great word. The government.
And he said the trade war would lead to
When this guy says trade, why does it sound like Tweed to me?
and he said the trade war would
Am I imagining that? Tweed? Trade?
and he said the trade war would lead to an economic downturn in the world.
I do like this. Lead to, that's good. Would lead to. And look at this phrase here, economic downturn. That is some pretty advanced vocabulary.
Lead to an economic downturn in the world. Well, I couldn't understand anything.
Sounds to me like he was playing dumb, but anyway.
So I just said that I had
Oh, notice that pause there. So...
I just said that I had to
Ah, come on now. I missed the stupid pause.
so I just said that I had to be somewhere else and I just left.
I had to be somewhere else and I just left. Alright. This guy made this sound very natural, very believable. A couple of mistakes. Unfortunately, this is maybe not the strongest example he's ever given us, but I still really like listening to this guy. Okay, like I said, don't use this as your introduction. Here we have the discourse marker. Honestly, here we have this topic referring to what he said before, and here we have the pronoun it, again referring to this topic. Here we have some basic features. So here we have there referring to the cafe. Here we have he referring to the foreign guy, and here he is repeated. I'm not going to mention all those. Here he helps us to understand and to follow the sequence of things that happens. He uses the word first and then kind of helps us to follow him as he goes through the story. The same with and then, and the same with so it was at that point. Makes it easy to follow. And then here we have this phrase, you know, not used too much. Let's look at the lexes. Although there isn't a whole lot that stands out, there also isn't a whole lot to criticize. Here we have I might as well. I do like this phrase. Not something you hear a lot of people use. Fortunately, when he talks about English, this is learning. When it comes to languages, let's use the word study. Unless you want to specifically say learn specific English vocabulary or learn English grammar, But unless it's something very specific, or if you say learning how to speak English, let's use the word study. That's what people go to do in coffee shops, study. Here's Dream University. That's a great adjective to use with nouns. And here, instead of just saying say, he uses the word reveal. Here's a great idiomatic phrase. Took a drastic turn. That's great. It's idiomatic because conversations cannot actually literally turn. When he uses the word relationships, he adds this S here, but two parties, as I said, can only have one relationship. Trade war is very good. Administration is very good. The administration refers to the people that a president brings into office. And economic downturn is also a great phrase. As far as the grammar goes, this is what I heard. I heard him say I have instead of I had. Maybe I misheard him, but that is what I heard. So I had the afternoon off. Here, using the past continuous was going to, because it's not true anymore, since in this situation he is taking the test right now. So last week he was going to take the test. Here we have began plus VING. Same thing here. Actually, maybe let's highlight that again. Began VING. Here again, he uses the past continuous was going to. Here we have the past perfect continuous, and here the past perfect. It's a very nice mix of tenses. And here towards the end we have started plus VING, and he throws in a modal would, and here the verb lead. Great stuff.